Dialogic Disciple is an invitation
to explore discipleship
in dialogue with the world as disciples of the Word. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Dialogic Disciple Podcast. My name is James Johnson and I am here with my co-host,
Elizabeth Shavy Johnson.
Hey!
Learning my name.
She knows her name. That's half the battle, you know.
Really
knowing
is.
who you are.
Whew.
The other half is, what are you going to do? What are you going to
Lord,
do?
I have to
now
write
that
a
you
paper
know
about
who
this
you are.
week. One of my papers this week that I'm writing is basically, what is your vocation in ministry? And I'm like, I can't deal with that right now. This is, no.
I think you're doing it right now.
Whew.
Can you just say I'm co-host of a podcast?
I am co-host of the Dialogic Disciple Podcast.
Yeah.
Maybe I will say that.
Yeah, you know, it's not a bad
a
gig
bad
if you
gig.
can get it, you know.
It's really not.
I had my ethics professor in undergrad told us there's only two questions you have to answer your entire life: is who are you and what are you going to do? And
Yeah.
I'm still working on those.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's deceptively simple.
So here we are today. We are, over the next couple of weeks, still talking about our Advent devotional, the birth of glory. We're in week 2 of Advent now. And our theme this week was the theme of peace as we continue to talk about Ichabod and Emmanuel.
Peace.
I'm going to go throw it to you first because you told me before we went on the air here that you had a thought you wanted to share.
Ooh, a lot of pressure. When I think about peace, and I don't know, maybe you do this, I don't know, this is a struggle that I have. I imagine this kind of idyllic scene when I hear the word peace.
Yeah.
Whether it's, like a serene nature landscape, or a mountaintop, or a beach, or an ocean, or this whole idea.
Like a Bob Ross painting.
Just like that.
That's exactly what you're thinking of. Now look at this little tree here. Doesn't it look so nice? It's
happy little trees.
It's a happy little tree.
Happy little trees. I love happy little trees. Or you think of Adam and Eve.
Can I just say real quick, did you know that Bob Ross had like a squirrel in his pocket oftentimes while he was painting? And sometimes a real baby squirrel.
What?
And he would go down and he would feed it with a little droplet thing every once in a while.
Really?
I saw a clip of it the other day.
I'm going to need to see some video evidence of this.
We'll have to figure out a way to get that into your mind. But,
I do love squirrels.
He had a little squirrel.
They're all named Jonathan, by the way.
My baby, happy squirrel. But anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So you're describing a Bob Ross painting.
Peace, the image that I have in my head when I think of peace. It's some sort of serene, peaceful image. Or you think about Adam and Eve in the garden before the whole apple thing.
I think that's where I go,
it's this naked and unashamed. You're strolling in the garden with God and everything is awesome. And that's peace. That's not... that is peace.
Are you going to disagree with that?
I know. Those things are peace.
That sounds terrible to me.
But what I'm saying is that I get myself in trouble by thinking that is the only definition of peace.
Very good. Yes. Okay.
And I think I do better remembering that peace looks a lot more like this little image that I made for you guys in the devotional. For those of you that don't have a printed copy, it is a little dove. It's on our peace week. It's a little white dove, and he is flying through a storm cloud.
Oh, yeah.
And that is how I do better to remind myself that is what peace looks like. It is the peace of God that passes understanding, that you have to create, or you rely on God to create, and that can happen no matter what the situation, to use our language here. Is.
That's really good. I think that's exactly right. And I think sometimes we forget that we can have that peace even in the midst of the storm.
Yes,
right?
It is much easier. So this whole dove and the storm thing, it is much more difficult to accept that definition, at least for me, of peace. For me, the more natural inclination is to believe that peace is that picture of the garden.
Yeah.
And why don't I have it? And it's everyone else's fault that there is no peace because that doesn't exist.
Right. It reminds me of the story from the Gospels, right? When Jesus is asleep in the boat and the storm is tossing the boat around and all the disciples are like, we're going to die. And they go down and find Jesus asleep and they're like, what are you doing, man? Because Jesus has that peace that he can just go to sleep in the middle of a storm. Yeah. And that's a physical embodiment of the kind of peace that is available to all of us when we have Jesus in our boat, so to speak.
Oh,
right? Isn't that the way to say it? Yeah.
Look at
that. No, I agree with you. I think that's a good image of peace, and we do oftentimes get caught up in that other image of peace. It is true peace for sure, but it's not the only version, and it's not the only kind of peace that's on offer. I think oftentimes we think of peace as being the absence of conflict.
Yes.
And that's not the case, right? That's not peace does include absence of conflict sometimes, and oftentimes does, but that's not the kind of peace we're talking about during this, what we have been talking about during this week of Lent. I'm sorry, Advent. We're not in Lent yet.
Whoa.
The peace that we have from God is not necessarily, it may be the absence of conflict, but it's not the absence of tension. And I think tension, this is what I was talking to my classes about this week. Tension is, I think, a necessary attribute of human nature, human identity, of who we are. And that you can have tension and still have peace. Like you and I have some tension sometimes, but I
don't know what you're talking about.
But we have peace with each other, right? And that peace that we get from God is peace that only comes from having the glory of God rest upon us. In other words, having the presence of God within our lives.
Talking about peace this week is on the heels of hope, which was our theme last week, is very helpful in this for me, because I think of it's the long arc of God.
Yeah.
So God is here with us, and God is very real, and God is very present, and God is Emmanuel, but God is also a lot bigger than us. And God's plan, God's kingdom, God's working, God's ultimate resurrection, the new creation, it is so much bigger and broader than the scope of our lives. Not to say that what we do and what we experience doesn't matter, because it absolutely does. But sometimes I think we have to zoom out in order to have that hope, which for me then ties into peace, because the situation is big and it's loud and it doesn't feel good, whatever that situation might be.
Yeah.
And sometimes it requires zooming out to that larger picture of God and having that hope to say, even if the situation is not the way I want it to be right now, it doesn't feel good, I don't like it, I can't see the end of it, I know that I believe in a God that can see the end.
Yeah.
And that end is resurrected, and that end is peaceful.
New creation, right? New heavens and a new earth.
And I trust and have faith that God's going to get us there.
I think that's what you have to have. I think this is where peace comes from, is when you have faith in God, which is to say that you trust God and that He can see the whole thing, because we can't. All right, and we never will be able to. We can barely see the little piece that we're working on, but it's a long story, like you said. Mm-hmm. And God knows. God's the author, right? Yeah. God knows how this is going to end, and we twist and turn and all this stuff, and we know because we have faith.
Well, I'm just learning all this stuff for the first time because I'm in seminary. So
well, yeah, I mean, there's a sense in which that's always true, right? We're always kind of learning it new every day, every year. The peace grows out of that faith. But I'll also say this: like, I have a suspicion that the thing that we human beings want more than anything is peace. And I mean that in the sense of like peace of mind and peace of heart and peace about the direction that we're heading and knowing that we matter and knowing where we fit and all of these things that cause turmoil and upset us. We want peace more than we want anything else. And out of that peace grows the hope and the joy and the love, even all the other things that we value. I think it all starts with the peace that comes from having trust in and believing in the presence of God in our lives, knowing that God is with us, and that from that we can truly have peace. We can really have the kind of peace that surpasses all understanding, and that I think then again feeds everything else that we do, right?
Yeah. Something that you brought up in your Hope and Healing sermon on Wednesday night, we do a service every year here at Northside in the chapel. It's kind of a couple different names, but I guess it's now called the Service of Hope. But James preached, and you talked about looking for the little moments, the little Emmanuels with us. And so we another thing that happened around here, we did our staff Christmas party today, and at the last minute, I had to find a blessing for the meal, and the little blessing that I found and read was about glimpses of the kingdom. So when we sit down to eat together, that's a glimpse. It can be a glimpse of the kingdom because we are partaking in this joy. And so what does it mean for us to look for those little moments, look for those Emmanuel's, those God with us moments, those glimpses of joy, the glimpses of the kingdom, people sitting down together, experiencing joy together. And maybe there's a storm all around us. I mean, we all came to that room, we all came to that service on Wednesday night, or today we all came into that room carrying something. We all have a situation. And for a lot of us, it's not what we would prefer or want. It's hard, it's tough, it's chaotic. But we can walk into that room and hopefully there's a glimpse there, a glimpse of God with us. And we have to learn to see those things for those glimpses that God is trying to give us. Because that's peace. That's peace.
That is peace. It's the spark that brings peace about, right? And that's really something that I hadn't thought about before, at least not in those terms, like in the sense of like the fact that there are many Emmanuels, right? There are many signs that God is with us, which is what Emmanuel is, a sign that God is with us. Of course, Jesus is Emmanuel. He's the ultimate Emmanuel. He's God literally with us. But there are so many other signs that God is giving us all the time that I am with you. I am with you. I am with you. I am with you. And when we can see those glimpses like you're talking about, they really do bring about the kind of peace that we are so desperate for. Particularly in a world that has very little peace in any kind of form, right? I think about the stories that we read this week from Scripture, starting obviously with Ichabod's mother, as we're doing, during this whole season of Advent, and that's really what she lost there at the end. She lost hope, of course, and there was no joy, but she lost any kind of peace, and there was real physical military conflict that had happened, that day. But that wasn't the only kind of peace that she had lost. She had lost the peace of seeing that God was with her. She couldn't believe it. She couldn't see it. She couldn't see Emmanuel. And it swallowed her. It swallowed her up in a way that I think a lot of moments that we might call Ichabod threaten to swallow us up. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that next week when we talk about how situations can threaten to define us. But having the eyes to see the signs that are in front of us, that God is continually trying to show us that he is with us. And it can be something as simple as going to a service. It can be something as simple as sitting down to eat food with fellow Christians or whoever, right, might be at the table. Because this is how God often reveals himself.
This is going to sound weird. Do you think that maybe sometimes we expect too much from God?
Oh, interesting. What do you mean? Say more.
That we expect, kind of like we talk about in the Gospels, that a lot of, Israel, the people at that time expected Jesus to come in with a blazing sword and, an army and defeat the Romans. Right. We expected all these things, to just come in and immediately, Jesus to snap his fingers and everything is that beautiful, peaceful return to the garden, right? You get that beautiful scene. And do we sometimes expect that is what it's going to look like when God shows up? And in doing so, then we miss those little moments when God is in fact showing up.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that's the lesson we learn from the Pharisees and the teachers of the law and other people that Jesus encountered. I think that's what you miss with Herod and the birth of Jesus even. He doesn't see Jesus' birth as a sign that God is with us. He sees Jesus' birth as a threat. But our expectations often blind us to what God is doing. That's why, God's always saying, hey, look, I'm doing a new thing, right? The thing that you're expecting, I might not do. I might do something else. Right? Forget the former things, Isaiah says. Forget the former things. I'm doing something new. Can you not perceive it? The problem is not in God's acting in the world or giving us signs. The problem has always been in our perception. And expectation blinds perception every single time. I don't think we expect too much of God, but maybe we expect the wrong things of God. We expect what we think is that we know how God is going to act. We think we know the character of God. because and in some sense we can't be blamed for that, because we've seen God act. We've seen God act, and so we know how God will act. Instead of saying God is always doing something new. Every time God acts, even if it's in a pattern, it's something brand new that God is doing that he's never done before. Yeah. Right? And there's a sense in which, like, that's one of the issues that we see in the First Samuel passage. On the day that the Israelites go out to battle the Philistines, what do? They remember. They thought back. Oh, you remember Jericho when we took out the Ark of the Covenant? We marched around the walls 7 times, and then we all shouted and blew our horns, and the walls came tumbling down, right? Let's do that, right? And so they go back and get the Ark of the Covenant and come out and just shout, with the Ark of the Covenant, because they expected the same God to act in the exact same way as before. And the response was they all got killed, right? Because that's not how God was going to act in that situation. They didn't bother to ask God, right? They didn't bother to go to God or say anything to God about, hey, how about this plan, right? They forget that it was the commander of the Lord's army that came to Joshua that told him to do that. They didn't just do that with Jericho. And so there's a sense in which what we need to be doing is asking God, how do you want me to see you today?
That's good. What
is it that I need to be looking for? Or how can I keep my perception free of obstacles, or free of expectation, so that I can see you act in ways that maybe I've never seen you act before? Because God is every day doing something new in our lives, showing us that he is with us.
That's good.
And if you go a day without seeing God, without seeing a sign, an Emmanuel in your life that God is with you, then you weren't looking. Yeah. Or you were blinded to it, because I guarantee you it was there. Even in the darkest situation, that's where hope and peace come from, those signs of Emmanuel within our lives.
That's really good. That's really good. So starting out with the idea, well, the belief, the faith that God is always with us. And so, like you just said, I have to have eyes to see it.
Right.
And so it's not that God isn't there, it's that I didn't have eyes to see.
And sometimes the best way to train ourselves to see it in the present and to know it in the future is to look back on the past. Yeah. And to look at all the ways in which God was with us and we didn't see it at the time. Man, you know what it reminds me of? Just popped in my head. You remember that Footprints poem?
Yes, I have that on my keychain on my keys, and I've been carrying it around with me since I was like 16 years old.
Yeah, so my grandmother had it up in the bathroom of her house, in the bathroom that everyone was allowed to use. And it was this beautiful poem. I read it like every single time I went in there. And, it's that whole thing where, there's two pairs of prints in the sand. Jesus is walking with this guy. And then all of a sudden, like in the dark times, in the times where things were really bad, there's only one set of footprints. And the guy's like, Jesus, why did you leave me? Why did you abandon me in these dark times? He's like, no, my son, that's when I was carrying you.
It was then that I carried you.
Yeah. And it gives you like goosebumps. And you're like, oh, Jesus. Yeah. I used to think that was in the Bible somewhere.
Obviously. Come on.
I went looking for it when I was like 11 or 12 years old.
Chapter 2.
I couldn't find it in the Bible. And I went to my grandma and I was like, where is this in the Bible? She's like, oh, Jay Bird. That's not in the Bible.
But it should be, Grandma.
Maybe in an appendix or something. I don't know. It's beautiful, though. But that's exactly what we're talking about, though. Those moments where in the moment maybe we didn't see it, but when we look back and reflect on our lives, we can see that God was trying to show me the entire time, hey, I'm with you. But we didn't see it. So maybe taking some moments to reflect on our past and say, you know what, God was there. Now I can see it. Looking back on it, I can see how God pulled me through that. That would help us, train us maybe to practice seeing it in the present. Not because God's going to act in the same way, but because just to have the faith that God is here and God is with us. That's really what this whole season of Advent is about. We do have the expectation that Jesus is coming and that Jesus will return. But the expectation cannot have like specific parameters upon it, right?
Yeah.
We run into the same problem again that the Pharisees and everyone else had in Jesus' time, even his own disciples, right? Where they had a hard time hearing what Jesus had to say because he wasn't saying it in the way that they expected.
It's good stuff. It's good stuff.
The other two stories that we talked about this week, the story of Elizabeth and Zechariah, and the story of Naomi, I think give us a better example of what it looks like to know that God is with us.
Better than the footprints poem?
Yeah, well, I mean, I have to say that, right? Officially, I have to say that because they're in the Bible.
Grandma and I are offended. Jokes.
But in the story of Elizabeth and Zechariah, looking at that story and how their situation gives birth to the peace, I think that they were lacking in their lives. These were folks who were part of the priestly class, elite members of the priestly class. Zechariah was working in the high priest, office, you might say. He was working in the temple of the Lord. And Elizabeth herself was a descendant of Aaron, the brother of Moses, the first priest, right?
Ooh, fancy pants.
And so this was, and one of the things that priests do, one of the jobs of a priest and a priest's wife is to make more little priests, right? And that's because if you remember in the Jewish tradition, only the Levites were priests. It's a family affair. It's a family thing, right? So if you're not producing more Levites, you're not producing more priests, and eventually priests run out, right? So part of the issue there is,
it's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure. And so by the time that the story opens up, Elizabeth and Zechariah are past childbearing age, really. And you have to think that people are giving them looks like there's a level of disgrace and pity upon them that completely eradicates all peace in their lives, right? They're thinking, well, we've failed. We've disappointed the Lord. Probably their friends are saying things like, well, what did you do wrong? What sin have you committed that the Lord has cursed you? Like Job's friends, and so you have all of that going on. It's how many nights, like I wrote in the devotional, like how many nights did they stay up crying out to the Lord, just take this, like free us from this, right? And eventually they do have a child. They literally give birth to a boy, but they also give birth to peace in that moment. All of that shame evaporates. All of that disgrace goes away. And I think a large part of it is because they remained faithful, even though their situation was not the best, right? They remained faithful. Zechariah continued to be a priest, right? And Elizabeth continued to serve in her role as well. They didn't give up. They didn't quit. They didn't roll over. They didn't say, well, God, if you're not going to give us a child, then we're not going to be servants of you. They continued to remain faithful. You see the same thing with Naomi, who, in a very real sense, goes through the exact same kind of thing that Ichabod's mother did, right? Where she loses her husband, she loses her sons, and she's left with these two daughter-in-laws who are Moabites, right? And she's like, I have to go back to Bethlehem. I have to go back to my people, Judah. They know that I left Judah to come live in Moab. They're going to receive me with shame and disgrace, I don't have another option. I can't take two Moabite women back because literally in Leviticus, I think it's chapter 23, but somewhere in Leviticus, it says no Moabite will ever enter into the fellowship of the Lord.
Wow. And
so you're like, Naomi's like, I'm not going to do that to you guys. They're not going to like you. You're not going to be accepted. And it's just a terrible situation. And one of her daughter-in-laws is like, yeah, okay, cool, I'm out, bye.
You're right.
But Ruth, who steals the show, Ruth is like, nah, your people are my people, your God is my God, I will go with you wherever you go. I'm going with you. And Naomi's like, fine. I mean, not really, but she says, she changes her name. She's like, don't call me Naomi anymore, call me bitter, is what she says. Yeah, I'm bitter. Right. But even though she's bitter, even though she clearly feels like she has no peace in this moment, she's lost everything, and now she's got to take care of this Moabite woman too. She goes back home and plugs herself back into the community, goes back home, and I think this is a sign of faithfulness. I don't think this is a sign of failure. I think it's a sign that she goes back to her people. She goes back to where she knows her God is. She goes back to the situation that she left from before. And she begins to work behind the scenes, to get Ruth and Boaz together. And what happens? Like, eventually Ruth gives birth to a child. But what does the scripture say? It says that Naomi has had a son.
Yeah. She
is the one. Her situation has given birth to peace and joy and all of these things that had been stolen from her or that she had lost. It's a story about Naomi. I keep saying this, but it's so true. This is a story about Naomi, and it's a story about her faithfulness. And even in the situation where she had no peace and she was bitter, she remained faithful. And that faithfulness gave birth to joy, peace, love, hope, all of the things we talk about during this season.
This is a little bit of a tangent, but as you were telling that story, there's another way that God shows up unexpectedly in the way, you're talking about that Levitical law that says the Moabites can't ever be part of the family of God. And then here we see Ruth. And I mean, you see it at the end of the chapter we read today where Ruth gives birth to Obed, who is the father of Jesse, father of David. Yeah. And then later on, isn't it when Matthew's doing his genealogy, she gets grafted in. Like she's Ruth, part of the family tree of Jesus. Yeah. And there's just a little moment, right? The Bible contradicts itself. This happens. And God shows up in a new way.
It's not contradicting itself as much as it's having a conversation with itself, right? There's a situation happening here. Not only Ruth, but Rahab
does
right?
too. Yeah.
There's all kinds of people who do not belong here, according to the law, right, are getting grafted in, and that's a good word for it. That's what Paul says, right? Yeah. It has always been God's plan, to graft in all people. All people are supposed to be Israel. All people are supposed to be part of the people of Israel. That's the master plan. And that's what Jesus provides. That's why the birth, death, life, resurrection, ascension, the event of Jesus Christ is so important. And you can see that with Ruth. You can see that with Ruth. You see it with Rahab, and you see it with a few others throughout the Old Testament as well. And then obviously into the New. But that's exactly right when you're talking about expectation. Mm-hmm. You would expect God not to break God's law when dealing with the people of Israel, all right, or with the ancestors of his own son who is coming. And yet, what do we see, right? Now, does that mean we read the law wrong? Does that mean that we don't understand what's happening in the law? I think there's probably some of that going on, for sure. I think the law of Moses was never meant to be black and white. It was never meant to be written in stone. Mm-hmm. The 10 Commandments were written in stone. The rest of it was commentary on the 10 Commandments. And there's a level of when you follow the word of the law but not the spirit of the law, you find yourself in a dark place. Yeah. God is doing something new, always doing something new, and God does work in patterns. That is a true thing. Because God has a character, God has a nature, and we know that nature and that character to be love and steadfast love. But God expresses and acts in that love in new ways, and we have to be able to see that. And I think the only way we can do that is to get out of the way of it, right? And just to say, God, I don't know what you're going to do today, but let me see it. Give me the eyes to see it, and if you speak today, give me the ears to hear it. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's a hard thing. It's an easy thing to say. It's a hard thing to do. Mm-hmm. Particularly when we get caught up in the rhythm of our own lives in our own day. We're all inherently selfish and all inherently use expectation to judge everything in our life, not just God, but people and places and things and everything else.
That's true.
So how do we step outside of our own expectation, even of ourselves? We don't even know what to expect of ourselves in any given moment or situation. We sometimes limit our own selves when we expect so little or too much of ourselves.
The paper that I'm writing, that's due on Friday, we have to reference something that we read this semester. This is for my Christian ethics class. And the piece that I picked to frame this essay around is by Rowan Williams, and he is I'm going to get this wrong, archbishop. He's ordained. He knows what he's talking about. James has the book.
He was
right
enthroned as Archbishop of Canterbury in February 2003.
There you
enthroned
that is
as Archbishop of Canterbury.
Very fancy. But so one of his essays is
that means he's Church of England.
Okay.
Anglican. Mm. That's our descendant. That's our ancestor. That's the Methodist Church.
Ooh.
And the Episcopal Church. For those, the Episcopals are like Methodists who don't read the Bible.
Okay.
That's a little.
He's not wrong, but
Anyway.
So Rowan Williams has this article or this essay. It's talking about this myth that we have come to believe about the self and how we tend to think that the self, the authentic self, is this thing that we have to uncover. It's in there,
Right,
you know,
right.
we're born with it and it's in there and we just got to like dig it out.
Right.
You know, you have it, you got to figure it out. You got to spend your life like uncovering who you truly are.
Right.
And Rowan Williams says, actually, I'm going to argue that it's not that way at all, that the self is something that we develop over time and we cannot do it alone. It's not a self-discovery, but all this happens in dialogue.
Yeah.
And you become who you are going to become in dialogue with others.
Yeah.
And with God, ultimately.
I like that a lot. It reminds me of, I don't remember where I got this from, but somebody asked Michelangelo one time, like, how did you sculpt the statue, David, right? And he says, it was always there. I just kind of removed all the pieces that were in the way. And that's the myth. That's the lie, that there's just pieces in the way and we got to chisel it and dig down and find who we actually are. And inside all of us is the statue of James or the statue of Elizabeth. But what you're saying is, or what Rowan Williams is saying is, maybe it's more like people just bring a bunch of clay together and we start to shape it and form it. We're doing the work of it, but people are also adding to that. People are got their hands in the mix too, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately God himself is working to shape and form who we are.
And it goes back to how we started. For me, anyways, this is why it makes sense. I'm just realizing this as I'm talking, why this makes so much sense in my head, because I tend to think that there is this ideal, you know, in this example, a peace, this ideal idea of peace out there, that perfect little picture that you have, and I've just got to figure out how to get that.
Right.
False.
Right.
The project is to move through the world in conversation, in relationship with people around you, with God, and figure out how to create that peace, the hope, the love, the joy. God is working on us and building us.
Yeah.
It's not this thing that's inside us that we're trying to get to or we're trying to attain.
I think that's really good.
It's so comforting to me.
It is, and it goes back to the thing, you know. It goes back to we've talked about this in other venues of our life, but it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And it's the journey that is salvation. It's the journey that is the Christian life. It's the journey that is the point of this whole project. It's not the destination. And when all you do is focus on the destination, then a lot of times you'll get to a place where the means will justify the ends, right? Because the end is the most important thing. And I think what Jesus teaches us, and maybe why the Bible isn't as specific about what the end looks like, but how the journey should look, is because we're supposed to focus on the conversation, the journey. We're supposed to focus on the meals that we have together. We're supposed to focus on the fact that we are in a storm, but that we have peace with Jesus Christ, because that is the point. The point is the journey. The journey is the salvation. We are always in the state of becoming, never being. And that is the being. The being and the becoming, they're the same thing.
That just makes the ministry of Jesus all the more powerful.
It does.
Not that it needed that, but again, it's the whole, we expected him to come in blazing and just fix the situation, snap his fingers, and it's all great, wonderful. And that's not how Jesus approached this whole project. He sat and ate with people.
That's right.
And the chaos and the oppression of Rome is all around him. It's all around all these people.
Yeah.
And Jesus is going to walk through this slowly and have conversations with people and love people and sit with people and eat with people. And that's how you create the kingdom.
That's it. That is God with us. Well, I think it's a good place to wrap it up today. I expect that we'll do this again next week. Elizabeth, thank you for joining me. And guys, thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.
Peace.